Hey everybody, it's Lon.TV, and we're taking a look today at the new Amazon Fire TV. It is a lot smaller than the old model that we looked at about 2 years ago, and this third generation one is actually slower. It doesn't perform as well, but it does support video modes that the old one did not. So this one's going to go up to 4K at 60 frames per second, whereas the other one topped off at 30 frames per second, but they did take some other stuff out of it as well, and we'll get to all of that in just a minute. But I do want to let you know, in the interest of full disclosure, that I paid for this with my own funds. All the opinions you're about to hear are my own. Nobody is paying for this review, and no one has reviewed this content before it was uploaded. So let's take a look and see what this thing can and can't do. So let's take a closer look now at the hardware. This costs about $70 as you see it, and it's a real departure from the prior edition of the Fire TV, which was a set-top box. This one is a dangler, very similar in look to what the Chromecast is. So you plug this into your HDMI port, and it just kind of sits off the side of your TV like that. A real big difference here in how it works. And as a result, you don't have any ports to plug things into this device, so you can't add any additional storage or other USB devices. In fact, it doesn't even have Ethernet out of the box. You got to buy a special power adapter for it that has Ethernet and power that plugs into the power connector here at the bottom. So if you are an enthusiast, I don't think you're going to like this one. I'm going to touch on some enthusiast topics as we work our way through the review. I think it's probably good for consumers who have a fancy new 4K HDR television, but a lot of folks who have come to like these Amazon boxes for their performance are going to be a little disappointed here. Now, on the techie side of things, this has 8 gigabytes of storage, 2 gigabytes of RAM. That storage is it. There's no way to get additional storage built into it. Also of interest is that they went with a slower processor versus last year. So this one's got a Cortex A53. The prior model had an A72. The GPU on this one is a Mali 450. Last year's version was a GX 6250. And as a result, the performance out of this one for gaming is not going to be where last year's was, but at the same time, we really haven't seen any apps take advantage of what those higher end GPUs in the old one were providing. So we're going to be taking a look at this one, but keep your expectations in check, because while there are some upgrades to this device, it is a very different strategy than the prior edition models. So let's get my desk cleared here, and we'll get the monitor up here so you can see how this thing works. So here is the main interface for your Fire TV. They've got some promotional stuff here from The Walking Dead running, but you can scroll through here and find some other stuff. So it does put your recent activities front and center here. So you can see I was watching The Tick and The Man in High Castle briefly as I was testing some things out earlier. The cool thing with the Amazon content is that a lot of their stuff not only supports 4K resolution, but it also supports HDR. And that's one of the features that this box brings to the mix, is that you are able to get that enhanced color from those HDR media over to your new fancy television. And I was able to watch I think I was watching The Tick in HDR. It looked great. Everything worked as expected. No gotchas when I was getting it all set up. In fact, the device here effectively recognized that my TV was 4K and had that HDR support. So that was a great experience on the Amazon video front. Also had a good experience on Netflix too. I was getting 4K at the appropriate resolutions and frame rates and HDR whenever it was working. So that is a good thing on that front for basic media watching. But you might want to check and see if your fancy new TV with HDR already has all of these apps built into it, and that might negate the reason for actually owning this thing, because while there are some cool apps and stuff on this for games and whatnot, really a lot of TVs now, especially ones that support the features that you might want to buy this box for, already have it built in, and you can save yourself a lot of trouble and save yourself also from having another device dangling off the side of your TV. Another reason to look at your TV over this is that there is no official YouTube app on here. So if I scroll back over here, you can see there is a YouTube app, but it's not really an app. It's something Amazon has put together called a web wrapper that will give you a familiar YouTube interface. Let me back out to the front screen here. But it's actually just using a web page that YouTube allows serving for TV kinds of interfaces. I believe they call this the lean back interface for YouTube. And one of the other issues I encountered with this was when I was hooked up to my 4K television, while I was able to watch content at 4K, my 60 frames per second content wasn't running at 60 frames per second. I was maxing out at 30. Same is the case here. Even at 1080p, I'm not doing better than 30 frames per second. So if you are watching YouTube and like a lot of that 60 frames per second content, both at 1080p and at 4K, this one is not going to do that for you unless you figure out a way to get the YouTube app loaded in through some other method. So it looks okay, but I was getting some drop frames earlier when I was testing, and it really was not an ideal YouTube experience, again, because there is no official YouTube app for this platform. There could be one in the future, but YouTube and Amazon are currently feuding with one another, which is why you don't see it on here. And again, most TVs, including the two that I have here in the house, have great YouTube clients already built in that support 60 frames per second at 1080p and at 4K. But if you are using Amazon's voice services, the Alexa thing, you can do that on here. You do have to push and hold down the button to get things to work, but I could say, tell me the weather today, and what will happen here is it will do everything that we typically see on an Amazon Echo device happening here on this one. It doesn't always listen. You do have to push the button, but you can get that done. I can also ask it something like, show me Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and that will give us some additional options for watching some of my favorite shows. So I can go over here to their Star Trek result, and I can click on that with the remote here now. After that voice search was made, I can go over to more ways to watch, and it will give me all the places that I can find it with the apps that I have installed on there. So I can watch it on Prime or on Netflix, and then they've got some other options here for me too. Now, there are some games that you can download on this as well through the Amazon App Store. They have free ones like Crossy Road here, as well as paid games like Grand Theft Auto Vice City, which I'll load up here real quick. Seems to work okay. The performance is fine, and typically this game runs on low-end smartphones, and it runs okay here too. Now, these are essentially Android games that you might find on your mobile phone. Unfortunately, though, because this is Amazon's App Store and not Google's Play App Store, anything you bought on Google Play, you'll have to repurchase through Amazon. There are ways that you can sideload, as they call it, the Google Play Store onto your device here. There might be some steps involved with that that might make it a little complicated for most consumers. So I often recommend, if you really want to play the Google Play Store games, get a Google Play enabled set-top box. There are plenty of them out there. It's just a lot less aggravation. But if you do have some things purchased on the Amazon App Store, as I do, you can reuse those purchases here if those games are compatible. Now, whenever I get one of these set-top boxes in, I run a benchmark on it to see how it might compare on paper to prior editions. And I was surprised to see that this one is a lot slower than the prior edition for gaming. We ran a benchmark test from 3D Mark called Ice Storm, and on that test we got a score of 6,577. Compare that to 16,635 on the Generation 2 device from 2 years ago. And look at the graphics performance here. Test 1 ran at 99.2 frames per second on Generation 2. Generation 3 ran at 25.4. So this is a real step backwards in overall graphics performance, but part of the problem has been that app developers are not really pushing any of this hardware. So we're seeing devices really not get much faster from one year to the next. And in this case, we're actually seeing a degradation in performance. Now, I do want to spend a few minutes on some things that enthusiasts might care about. The first is cable cord cutting. I use a special TV tuner here in the house called an HDhomerun, and in full disclosure, they are an occasional sponsor here on the channel, but are not sponsoring this video. And what this lets me do is bring in my cable TV signals over my computer network, and I've got a bunch of set-top boxes that I use throughout the house to watch this content. And as you can see here, it's really struggling with one of my local broadcasts. A lot of skip frames here as this video is playing back, and it's not doing all that well. Part of the problem is that this is a wireless device only. Out of the box, it does not have a wired network connection, which does work better for some of these over-the-air broadcasts in my experience. But I expected better out of this because it does have a 2x2 AC wireless radio built in, and it's just not able to keep up with some of my local broadcasts here. If I switch over to a cable network that usually comes in at H.264, which is a little more compressed and a little less demanding, I am seeing better performance on it. But again, this does not make a very good cable cutting tuner here for me. So again, okay on the cable stuff here, but not so great for over-the-air broadcasts that a lot of people buy these things for. I think it would probably do better if I did have the Ethernet adapter on there, but I also have set-top boxes that just work better off of wireless than this one is. And I think tucked behind your television, it's really going to struggle quite a bit with this. And I also side-loaded Kodi onto this. I'll show you a great way to do that in a second. And of course, Kodi is one of my favorite media players, especially for playing back my Blu-ray movies that I store on network-attached storage in the house. Now, right now, at a lower resolution, it seems to be doing okay. I have a few dropped and skipped frames, but when I was playing it back on my 4K set, it was not able to upconvert those 1080p movies all that effectively, and it looks like I just crashed it here playing that movie back. So performance on Kodi really was not acceptable to me. It also doesn't support some of the lossless audio formats, so you don't get DTS HD or Dolby True HD with it, and really bad performance when it is working. It was also unable to switch my TVs into 24p mode either. So as a Kodi device, definitely not so great. I believe the last one did work a lot better than what we're seeing out of this current one. And if you're curious as to how I got Kodi loaded up, there is an app called Downloader on the Amazon App Store. It's by AFTVnews.com, and my friend Elias Saba runs the site. I did a full video of this, and it's a really easy way to get some of these apps like Kodi that are not on the Amazon App Store loaded up onto your Amazon devices. In full disclosure, Elias did sponsor my weekly wrap-up video a couple of weeks ago, but it's an app that I think is very useful here on the Fire TV. So that's going to do it for the new Fire TV. I'm surprised that they did what they did here. It's a real step backwards for enthusiasts. I think a lot of folks did like the Generation 2 device because it did perform quite nicely. This one doesn't perform as nicely, has less expandability, and as an enthusiast device really didn't pass some of the basic tests that we put these things through here on the channel. For general consumers, though, it does play back 4K HDR content nice and smooth. At least it did for me here in the studio, so that was a good thing. As long as you've got a good wireless connection, I think it'll be okay for that kind of stuff. But again, check your television first, because a lot of the features that this brings, 4K and HDR, may already be built into your television, and you'll likely get a better YouTube client on that TV as well. So check there first before spending your money. But overall, this is a step backwards from Amazon and a bit of a disappointment to me as an enthusiast. This is Lon.TV. Thanks for watching.
This channel is brought to you by my Patreon supporters, including gold level supporters, the Black Eyed and Blues Music Hour podcast, Chris Allegretta, John Prawl, William Miller, and Kalyan Kumar. If you want to help the channel, you can by contributing as little as $1 a month. Head over to Lon.TV/Patreon to learn more. And don't forget to subscribe. Visit Lon.TV/S.